I'm Mark Gagan, and you're listening to the Voice of Insurance podcast, produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling enterprise-scale underwriting through a single pane of glass. Today's guest is going to be giving us a masterclass in a really specialist and relatively new class of business that most of us will have heard about over the last 15 to 20 years, but few will have had the chance to get to know intimately. The class is Warranty and Indemnity, W&I, which is often also known as Reps and Warranties. And the expert who's going to be guiding us through this fascinating world is James Dodd, founder of recently launched specialist MGA, Devonshire Underwriting. James is an exceptional entrepreneur, and this podcast will answer all the questions you had about this exciting class of business but were too scared to ask, as well as leave you in no doubt about the scale of the ambition of James and his growing team. We'll learn the ins and outs of this specialist line, as well as the state of its finely balanced markets. James is a great communicator and a patient teacher, and if you give me the next half an hour, I promise you'll learn an awful lot, as well as have some fun on the way. Enjoy the podcast. James, welcome to the Voice of Insurance.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, for anyone who doesn't know you, why don't you give us a brief introduction to yourself and run us through your insurance career to date and how you've got where you are?
So my name is James Dodd. I'm a partner and founder at Devonshire Underwriting. My career and work experience, I read law at the University of Nottingham and the University of Texas. I then started a legal training contract with the US law firm Weil Gotshal & Manges. I was there for about 4 years in total. After that, I moved across to another couple of US law firms before transitioning into underwriting. I was an underwriter for approximately 7 years before setting up Devonshire Underwriting with my other partners and founders, Natasha Atre, Charles Turnham, and James Fletcher.
And you've always been an entrepreneur who wanted to run your own business?
Yes, I have always dreamed of doing that. I very much liked working in law and at law firms, but there was a very defined structure to them. So the idea of being an entrepreneur did always appeal to me, yes.
And Devonshire, I have to disclose an interest. I'm from Devon myself, the county of Devon
Yeah.
in England. So I presume, obviously, you must be from Devon as well or something, or is it?
No,
You love cream teas?
Nothing quite like that, actually. I mean, the name came about in collaboration with our branding company. We wanted to basically find a name that reflected what we're trying to do with this business, which was to create a trusted and established name and business. And so we thought Devonshire, traditional.
Nice.
Exactly. So that
People
was the
going
kind
on
of
holidays,
thinking.
solid. I suppose there's the Devonian period, the big red rocks from back in the time when the UK was actually on the equator,
Right,
which seems
yes.
almost unbelievable. You've been around for how long?
We started on the 2nd of April of this year. We are 8 people. So we started with the 4 founders and then one of our underwriting managers, Sam Jeter. We then hired another underwriting manager, Mike Grant, and we have 2 excellent analysts, Ellie and Henry. So currently up to 8. We do have another joiner in December on the tax side. So we're looking to grow, but we want to make sure that we're maintaining quality in our product and our offering. So not growing too quickly or unnecessarily.
This is a class of business that's relatively new. I mean, it's not been invented yesterday, but it's been around for, let's say, 20 years, 20 plus years. It's something I've been writing about as a journalist, but I haven't necessarily understood it perfectly. So it would be quite good. And I suspect there's lots of listeners who don't know it that well, who obviously are adjacent to it. They go, who are those people? They do all that warranty and indemnity stuff over there. So can you just, for those lay people, I mean, obviously from the basis of a smart insurance person, but who's probably in another class, who doesn't know exactly what you get up to, why don't you tell us about it? Who buys it? What's it for? What are the main products, etc.?
Of course. So W&I is covering the losses that arise from a breach of warranty or claims under a tax indemnity, usually in an M&A deal, so under a share purchase agreement.
So someone's promising something to someone, say, look, I'm telling you the state of the affairs is this, these are my tax liabilities, but if you buy this company and then the tax authorities come after you and say you owe us by an extra $500,000 somewhere, then don't worry, the insurance will kick in.
Exactly. As my wife has once said, we insure promises. So that's a very good way of saying it. So yes, instead of pursuing a seller in the event of a warranty breach or a claim under the tax indemnity, the buyer can then make a claim against the insurers, i.e. are very highly rated.
And so that's good for the seller of that company to say, well, I've bought this insurance. So now when you're negotiating to buy my company, you don't have to worry about that. You can't use that as a negotiating tactic anymore. You're just going to focus on the fundamentals of this company. And presumably it probably works. It means they can get a better price for their business, and which exceeds the amount they would pay for the premium.
Yes, exactly. So there's benefits for both the seller and buyer. It means the seller retains minimal or no liability. And so it gets the money in and has the freedom to go spend it on whatever it had that earmarked for. For PE houses, it allows them to wind up the funds and then return money to investors because you've limited those ongoing liabilities. And it's covering the unknowns in a transaction. So normally you have, and we would always expect the buyer to be undertaking due diligence on the deal from a legal, financial, and tax perspective. Risks identified in there wouldn't be covered by W&I. It's the things that haven't been identified. Our other two products, tax and contingency, those are more for those identified risks.
And also, I suppose, for those parties, it's another set of eyes looking over this company and another set of expert eyes. Obviously, the more experience you get, the more you know what to look for.
Yes, I think that's a really good point, because as part of the process, we do ask underwriting questions. And there have been times where we've asked a question and yes, that might be something that the advisors haven't necessarily picked up on. Given our familiarity with the class of business or the jurisdiction, then yes, we can ask those questions that maybe the advisors hadn't thought of in this situation.
And tax insurance against, is it all part of the same thing?
Yes. So tax coverage will be provided under our W&I policy.
Yes. I was looking at your website and saw that tax is almost sort of as if it was a separate, because you can buy tax only, I presume.
You can. So the tax and contingency products cover specific risks. So something's picked up in the DD, and then we can look actually to provide coverage for those specific tax issues or on a contingent basis. And that's something that we were very keen to do as Devonshire, being able to offer those three products. So something's identified in a DD report that normally wouldn't be covered under the W&I, but we can then say to the clients, we can explore potentially covering this under a tax or contingency product.
Excellent. DD is due diligence.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I know this is one of your standard abbreviations that you're just using all day.
Sorry.
W&I, of course, is Warranty and Indemnity. I'm just thinking that the distribution for this kind of product is probably different. Are you dealing with brokers all the time, or is it financial advisors and intermediaries that are more likely to be distributing your product?
It always does come through brokers.
Yeah.
So the brokers will provide us with their submissions, which usually comprise the information memorandum, which sets out the details of the targets, how many employees, which jurisdictions, etc. And in that, they'll request limits and some other coverage enhancements. They'll provide us with a draft of normally the share purchase agreements, and we then provide them with those quotes. Yes, the financial advisors, law firms, they'll be in very close contact with the brokers on these.
I can guess what the typical claim is. Let's talk about that typical claim. How does it come in, and how long does it take to manifest itself, and how long does it take to therefore resolve?
Okay, TinTech London Market is back on the 4th of February. It's the event exploring how technology is driving change in the London market and enabling the business and operating models of the future. Attend TinTech London Market to discover practical insights to help you successfully deliver technology-led change. Hear how industry thought leaders are enabling client-centric business and operating models. Plus, how new technologies like artificial intelligence are driving innovation. Benchmark your approach with market leaders who are navigating the same challenges you face. Hear case studies from those at the cutting edge of technology innovation, and benchmark and discuss strategic solutions with your peers. Don't miss TinTech London Market. Search TinTech London Market to discover the full agenda and speaker lineup. See you there.
Good question. It depends. So the policies that we write, W&I, tax and contingency, are relatively long. So the general warranties will normally be covered for 3 years. The tax and fundamental warranties being ones that speak to title to shares, capacity to enter into the transaction, etc. Those are normally about 7 years. So a relatively long period we have for claims to come through. I think quite interestingly, we have seen that the earlier a claim comes in, the more likely it is to be paid, just from past experience.
Is that because it's suddenly really clear cut? Or is it if it comes in really early, or is it suddenly they realise that, there's something seriously wrong?
Yes, I think that is right. Yes, so for something to come in that quickly, as you said, it must be quite big and something that's capable of being realised that quickly. So yes, it's probably the more obvious ones in that case.
The other ones are a bit more subtle, are they? Or
yes, you can, as you would expect in an M&A contacts and pursuant to a share purchase agreement, the claims can be very complex. So that's what really dictates how long the claims process will take, as well as the number of jurisdictions the claim relates to and how long it will take us to determine the circumstances which the claim notice relates to. And indeed, once we have established, yes, there has been a breach, what's the quantum of that loss, which is also a very difficult area. So as I said, if it's a very simple breach and the quantum can be identified very quickly, then that could be a matter of weeks. In our experience, and I think the types of policies that Devonshire writes, you would normally expect 6 to 12 months for a claim to be settled. But in very complex cases, it's not unheard of for that to be 24 months.
all the parties to this transaction are all quite sophisticated. So one presumes if they're sophisticated tax lawyers on one side, sophisticated tax lawyers on the other side, and sophisticated tax lawyers working for the different tax authorities and different jurisdictions around the world, they're all quite smart and professional people who are quite good at coming up with theories and arguments as to why you might be in breach of something, whereas an other creative accountant on the other side probably thinks, well, no, that's nonsense. This is perfectly legal under, myriad tax statutes that we have in every jurisdiction. So yes, I'm starting to talk myself into this being quite complicated. And yet, so some of these claims are probably not that clear cut.
Exactly. As you said, both sides are very well advised with lawyers, accountants, tax advisors, etc. So before the process and during the process, you've got a lot of advisors feeding in to the drafting of the SPA, which ultimately contains the warranties that we're insuring. So even at that stage, yes, you've got a lot of experts looking at it. And as you said, when a claim comes through, as people have become more familiar with the process, I think the claims process has also become more sophisticated. People know how to present a claim. They know what insurers are generally going to ask for and request. So that whole process has become a lot more sophisticated, yes.
Thinking about the risk side of this, when we look at the theory of risk, when we all sort of do our CII exams or whatever it is, you've got experience rating, which is at least that's quite simple. We all understand what that is. What was the burning cost and what else? Then there's that exposure rating, which is more theoretical, more sort of intellectual, shall we say, and less based on what's actually happened and gone before. How do you model a risk like this? Or is it really modelable? Because, of course, there's so much human behavior behind it. And I was just thinking, there's 20,000 million pages of the UK tax code, for example, and there probably being new pages written every day. How can you model that? And also, there seems to be so much human behavior. Of course, there's change of governments and change of regimes. Of course, in the UK, we've just had a change of government. That might mean that the way they interpret the tax code, you could interpret it more aggressively or more leniently. Because again, these things seem to be relatively ambiguous and debatable often. How do you get your head around that risk and the nature of it and the fact that it's changing all the time?
Yes, it's a great question. And a lot of what we do is based on experience and feel, if you'd like. So every M&A transaction is different. You've got different buyers, sellers, targets will be different, etc. And so being able to model that and price it by putting it into a computer or something doesn't really work. There are so many variables at play. And as I said, a lot of it is driven by past experience with that particular industry or sector. The underwriters know what to look for, etc. And that's something I think at Devonshire, that's one of the key things that we're focused on. Between myself and my colleagues, we've underwritten over 800 policies. And that allows you to, I think, really develop that feel for the transaction, spotting where the gaps are likely to be, rather than simply being able to put it into a model with various inputs and then it's spitting out a price and coverage. It's just not that kind of product.
The sort of skills you need in your business as underwriters, and perhaps some of those brokers specializing in broking this specialist class of business, I'm going to sound a bit like Liam Neeson. You need a particular set of skills vis-a-vis more traditional sort of P&C stuff. So what are your core skills? I mean, a lot of you are lawyers, aren't you? Are you all lawyers?
We're not. A lot of people in this space are lawyers. Thankfully, not everyone is, and not everyone in our team is. I think the critical thing for any underwriter in this space is having the ability to be able to step back and look at the bigger picture to have flexibility and also have appetite for risk. We obviously are providing an insurance product here. We do have to be willing to take on that risk. But I think a lot of what we do is like putting a jigsaw together. We have to look at the various pieces. So that could be the legal analysis on this target, as well as the financial analysis and the tax analysis. Put those together, but then be able to step back and look at the target as a whole in order to fully assess where the risks are in this business. So you don't need to, and very few people are qualified in all those areas. As you said, I think the vast majority of people in this market are former lawyers, accountants, or tax professionals. Understanding those areas will help you make an informed assessment of the risk profile. But as I said, I think the main skill that you really need is the ability to look at the bigger picture, have this flexibility, and being able to take on this risk.
No one's doing what used to be their day job. Their new job is this insurance job. And it sounds quite multidisciplinary that you're bringing in lots of different skills all together and trying to blend it to something that makes sense.
Exactly. I mean, lawyers, for the most part, job is to point out risk, to do their due diligence, to identify what risks are there, any likely quantums, and how they can be minimized. Obviously, as an insurer, you have to take on risk, and that's part of the product that we're offering. So people do have to, I think, undergo a bit of a change in mindsets.
Exactly. The premium is there for a reason.
Well, exactly.
It's to pay for some of that risk that you've taken on.
Exactly. And no one's going to buy this product if claims aren't paid. So it's a really important part. It's something that we're very focused on at Devonshire, is the claims process, to make that easy for the clients. And that's what the market needs.
I suppose all those people, in their previous life, they're always working for a fee, for an hourly billable rate or something. But now the fee is this premium, which is a slightly intangible idea of I'm removing risk for a fee.
Exactly.
So I presume from all of this, it's quite an analog business, even though I'm sure there are some applications for technology. It sounds like none of you are particularly worried about having an AI agent taking all your jobs. But do you think you're going to be able to apply AI somewhere? Presume there's tons and tons of documentation. Presume you can get an AI agent to read all that for you and help you get through the mountains of paperwork.
Yes, I think somewhat boringly, I think it is more on the administrative side that we see the benefits of AI. Underwriting is more about looking at the company as a whole, seeing the bigger picture and the feel of the business. So I think it's quite hard to see AI's involvement in that. I know when I was in private practice at various law firms that there was a drive to have AI undertake some of the due diligence there to reduce costs, etc. I think that's had some success, but still limited success.
Actually, funny enough, my very first exposure as an insurance journalist to AI, we didn't call it AI then, was a product called Reword that was part of one of the law firms. And it was comparing wordings. It was really, really useful.
Right.
And it was finding lots of things in treaty wordings that people perhaps didn't want to be found, that were very glad that they actually had found them and cleaned them up, actually. And that was 20 years ago, actually. So,
yes.
So actually, we'd say that the most progressive law firms have been pretty good at this.
I think on the due diligence of a complicated business in the same way as underwriting that complicated business, I think does require someone to be able to look at it in the whole, use past experience in order to make judgments about what's particularly relevant, etc. So I think AI will be useful, as you've said, in terms of some of the documents. It will be quite useful when we're looking at claims and being able to spot patterns, which areas claims are particularly most prevalent, etc. But from what I've seen of AI, and I'm no AI expert, but from what I've seen from AI so far, I think its involvement in underwriting at the moment is relatively limited.
More something that might help you at least imagine it as sort of a useful assistant that might be able to flag up a few things for you.
Exactly. And like with any business, there is a lot of administrative documents that needs to be done. We do see a number of deals. So helping with that kind of thing is probably most helpful.
In the London insurance market, what's the state of that W&I market at the moment?
So obviously the W&I market follows the global M&A market very closely. So we're quite glad to see a bit of stabilizing of both the M&A and transactional
so perhaps
market.
give us some context. Give us the history of it. So I would say, having looked at it from the outside, I'd say that, 10 years ago, I remember everyone telling me this is probably the best performing class of business in the market, and everyone's whispering about it. Very low loss ratios. became a lot more competitive. Lo and behold, I'm sure some of that premium was competed away, rightly so, because if something's got a 10% loss ratio, there's probably something wrong with it. The price is probably too high. The market did its thing and competed away a lot of that. And then maybe we got close to where the burning cost was. This is just a bit of conjecture from me. And then maybe it's stabilized now. Is that about right?
Yes, that's very accurate. I think when the product started, coverage was narrower than it is today. Policies would include more exclusions around high-risk areas. Pricing would be higher. The retentions would be higher, etc. There would be fewer what's known as coverage enhancements, which are things included in the policy to improve the position. So there was certainly less of that when this product started. Now, as brokers have become more sophisticated, the lawyers are using this more and more, so becoming a lot more sophisticated with it as well. That's really driven coverage to be expanded. There's things being covered that would never be covered 10 years ago. It's driven prices down a lot. I think partly because of that and partly because of the global M&A environment with deals being down, the pricing this year has gone to a very low level, probably an unsustainable level in the long term, if I'm honest. We're seeing a gradual stabilizing, maybe a bit of improvement in that pricing to a better level.
Do you think were there exits in the market or just suddenly, chief underwriting officers around the world saying we need to tighten this up, or news from on high to say, yes, right, everybody, it's gone down as far as it can?
The reason, or part of the reason it did go down so low was because there weren't that many deals. M&A was down. Right. So people were fighting for these deals. Often coverage, and nowadays on good deals, coverage between insurers will be very similar. There's an all-time high number of insurers in the market now. So the only way, other than through relationships, but the only way to compete is through lowering pricing.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think really contributed to that low figure. As deals have come back and there's more deals for people to underwrite, then there's fewer markets quoting for every single deal. So that's allowed prices to go back up. I think it's very positive that the market's gone through quite a challenging phase. We at Devonshire are very proud to have launched in that challenging phase and launched successfully. And I think all facts are pointing that the market will thrive over the coming years.
It's interesting, that dynamic that you have between this being a series of one-offs. You could imagine it, in a more traditional sense, you'd look at constructional risk and say, well, if no one's building anything, then the constructional risk underwriters are going to have to be bidding on the one last presumably government project that's still going. And then presumably they get a better deal than they would have done back when there was a construction boom on. So this being a series of one-offs and therefore prone to the vagaries of the M&A cycle, is there any way of changing that, of trying to get renewal business as a way of making your book more stable? Because otherwise, presumably, your book is always inherently slightly unstable.
As you point out, this is a non-renewal line of insurance, but that doesn't mean we don't see repeat custom from the same clients. So clients who typically use this product are large acquisitive corporates or private equity houses, as well as their regular law firms that advise them. So it's often the same people that come up on a lot of deals, particularly the law firms. So the way that you can secure that repeat custom from those kind of customers is by offering excellent service, a very smooth process.
The same fund, same lawyer firm, same group of people, they come to you regularly, go, well, they've been my W&I go-to, so I'll make sure I always quote with them.
Yes, that's what we certainly aim to do. To do that, you have to offer excellent service, excellent coverage and claims experience. That's something we're very focused on at Devonshire, because we know to get that repeat business, you do need to be brilliant across all those areas. So yes, if you can do that, then you can start getting a policy agreed with that particular P house or client. They know the process. You can become familiar with each other. You can become familiar with how that law firm undertakes its due diligence, etc. And you can just make a very smooth process.
You can pick some of your favorites and they can be your favorite, you can be their favorite. And I think this will be a really good relationship because we like the way they do their due diligence. We like them generally. And we've actually been through some claims and then they're also good actors during that process. So you get to know each other well.
Exactly.
And then they like you as well, yeah.
Yes, exactly. They do, or they acquire the kinds of targets that's within our appetites. Insurers generally have different appetites with the size of the deals that they want, the jurisdictions, the targets, etc. So yes, you finding a particular corporate or PE house that's very interested in those kinds of targets, or a law firm that specializes in advising clients on those particular targets, then yes, that means that you can get a very good relationship going there.
And this is still a relatively young class of business. I'm sure you still get organic growth, because even some of the most mature markets, I'm sure there's still people who didn't know this product existed, who are still coming online effectively being told, oh, did you not know that there is an insurance you could buy when you're coming to sell your company? And they wouldn't have known. So I presume that you're still getting a lot of organic growth, but are there any markets where it's now, you'd say it's coming up to maturity?
So the level of organic growth answer depends on which team of underwriters you ask and in which jurisdiction. For example, if we take the US market first.
And that's the one I would always assume that's probably the most mature market. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. So Reps and Warranties is how they refer to W&I there. That's where the product first launched. That's where you have an incredibly well-established domestic market. You've got the brokers and underwriters there having agreed form policies with the major law firms in order to assist in a very efficient and speedy underwriting process. That means you can turn around transactions very quickly. So I think that market is pretty settled in terms of the major players there, brokers, underwriters, and also coverage is quite settled, what people are willing to insure. So I think growth there is quite limited.
So that's more down to the cycle of the M&A itself.
Exactly.
Because basically everyone who's needed to hear about this product has heard about it and has already probably would have bought it once.
Yes, exactly. I don't think there's many brokers that would be marketing to major law firms out there about what W&I is.
So where's presumably Europe slightly less mature, so you've got some more natural organic growth to come within Europe?
Yes, I mean, Europe's a fragmented market in terms of how it approaches transactions, the documents used, and also warranty coverage there. So for certain markets, the UK, for example, it is now quite a mature product, being used in probably the majority of transactions. So again, potentially limited organic growth there. But other parts of Europe, there's certainly opportunities there. For example, France, warranty coverage in M&A transactions there was always historically quite limited, and there was only really cover for the fundamental warranties. As large institutional investors have come in, for example, from the US, they now want to see coverage for the warranties that they're getting in the US in France. So that's contributed to that market opening up. And I think that's a really good area for growth. Outside the US and Europe, Australia and New Zealand, I think are quite developed, but we're seeing more and more in emerging markets. In Africa, South America, there's more teams based there and there are more deals there.
Almost everywhere. And Asia Pacific, one presumes as well.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah. In most jurisdictions now, with a good rule of law, with good advisors and good parties, then yes, you should be able to get some kind of coverage.
So your fundamental is we all need to be able to trust that the law will be straight and blind, etc.
Exactly. As we're taking on legal risk here.
I suppose like any insurance product, we all ultimately require at some point a court to rule on something that wasn't necessarily in any of our policy or legislated for, or perhaps not in our minds as a potential scenario when we transacted the business. But so we need the rule of law to be working, don't we?
Exactly. So that's, I think, some geographical growth. I think where we are seeing more growth is some specific risks and asset classes. So, for example, the insurability of secondary transactions, synthetic policies, and also the insurability of...
Sounds really interesting. What's all that then? So what's a secondary transaction in that
Secondary transaction is, they're becoming more popular, is when a fund is basically selling assets to another fund or having new investors come in.
Oh, right. So when, say, they're in a sort of 7-year fund and they need to close that fund and they want to sell it to another fund so they can realize the gain that they've made during the time they've held that company, for example, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So if you have a fund that has a number of assets, it's coming to the end of the life of that fund, is meant to distribute monies to investors. But as we've seen recently, it's a bad time to sell, or it's a particular trophy asset for that particular fund manager. So it doesn't want to sell. It can either bring in new investors, or sell to another fund, and it's the insurance to cover that sale to the new fund, which is particularly specialized because the due diligence will be limited on the operational assets. It will be more focused on the funds, whether all contributions have been paid, what future contributions, etc. So it's a different type of underwriting, certainly.
So within Devonshire, where are you expecting most of your growth to be coming from?
One of our real focus is on emerging markets. We have a lot of experience in Africa and South America. So that's certainly one of our geographical focus areas. But then also on some of these more specific risks on the synthetic policies, on secondary risks, etc. So we are lucky that we have experience across a range of jurisdictions, across a range of industries, and of different types of specific risks. So we do think we're well placed to be able to jump on
So
those.
strategically, does that mean you're likely to open up new offices in different parts of the world? Sao Paulo at this time of year is quite nice.
Yes, no. So I've heard, yes, that certainly is. We will always be a London headquartered insurer, but when there is the opportunity to open another office, that's something that we're certainly very keen to do. We'll assess the situation in a couple of years to see which markets that will be most beneficial to, because not all markets, even though they can be very profitable, require boots on the ground. There's lots that are very well and very happy to be serviced from London, whereas there are others that do want people on the ground, that actually, maybe because of cultural reasons, to be able to have a face-to-face meeting, to have someone that speaks that language is something very valuable. So we're going to develop that and understand that over the next couple of years and really focus on that.
And what about in terms of the classes that you write? You're obviously an incredible specialist, but then, of course, through your work, you get to know huge numbers of financial professionals and lawyers. So would it make any sense for you to, at some point in the future, expand into adjacent lines, like, I don't know, like the PI for those lawyers or et cetera, some of the professional lines for those financial professionals?
It's interesting, and it's certainly something that I think we will consider in the future. I think right now our focus is definitely on our core products, W&I, contingency and tax, and achieving our goal of being a trusted advisor that's recognized for its excellence in service offering and the products we offer. We know the transactional risk market at the moment is very competitive, and we have to work incredibly hard to gain the trust of brokers and clients. And we're very much focused on that right now. So I think in the future, we'd be open to those kind of discussions. But right now, our focus is on those core products and excellence.
Yeah, and there's been quite a proliferation, and obviously with this competitive environment, a proliferation of different underwriting entities opening up in the last 10 years, for example. Do you think that that could lead to some consolidation at some point? Could you be consolidating?
Potentially, yes. I think, as I said before, there are insurers who specialize in different types of deals. Everyone has different appetites for the size of the deal that they want to do, jurisdictions,
different vertical sectors as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think the market does appreciate having different options to go to. But I think broadly, that kind of consolidation, I think, will very much depend on macroeconomic factors and the global M&A position.
Because maybe it would make sense, I suppose, because something that's less cyclical, someone who's more of a business that said, well, I could be more global, I could be more of a one-stop shop, I could do almost everything and therefore have a more diversified book because I do a bit of everything.
Yes, exactly. And that's what our contingency and tax policies also help with. Interestingly, tend to be busier when there's a bit of a downturn in M&A. So that's quite a nice natural hedge to W&I maybe being a bit quieter for us, M&A being down. Then we can really focus on those areas. So that's very helpful to do. On the consolidation, if there's enough deals to service the market, then I think that will keep people happy and there won't be as much. I think if deals do drop, then the number of players in the markets might have to come down as well to reflect that.
Well, James, I've come to the end of all my questions. Thanks very much for being so patient with me. And I thought it was important to have a kind of educational element to this because, I think not everybody knows exactly what you get up to. And I know an awful lot more than I did before. So anything else that you need to add that we've missed, you think?
No, that's great. I mean, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
And good luck with everything. Sounds like you're going to be really busy for the next few years.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this program. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry. The Voice of Insurance podcast is produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling enterprise scale underwriting through a single pane of glass. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.